Ballots will begin dropping in our mailboxes just next week. The election is getting close, and we get into the whole thing. The game is politics. The game is on.
I'm Bob Marks.
And I'm Mark Simon. Still, after all these years, the presidential race, the first presidential debate, there's a lot going on, Bob. Let's just plunge right in. Presidential race looks as tight as ever. I'm always skeptical, which is what a surprise.
Yeah.
When I see these state level polls that show an undecided of 5%, I just don't believe that it's that low. I think that the way the polls asked, they asked 2 or 3 times if you had to vote today. And I think so. So I think those numbers are going to be hard. They're not hard numbers. I think they're soft in some ways. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't think for a long time there's been much of undecided voters. To me, undecided voters are people who are trying to figure out if they're going to vote at all. And so I agree with you. What it really comes down to is turnout and who's able to turn out their voters. Both sides have been able, proved in 2020. I mean, even though Biden won, Trump had the largest vote ever for somebody that finished second. So I was thinking back, the last time we did one of these political roundups was exactly 1 month ago. I think it was September 3rd. And I remember we talked at that time about how close the race was. And looking at all those 7 swing states, it's still basically the same. It really hasn't changed. Harris got a bump after the debate, which she clearly won, but she's not been able to sustain any momentum. And I think as this race continues to drift and it gets closer, there are some things that may work to Trump's advantage unless she's able to really sustain some momentum. What do you think?
Well, it's clear their own internal polling shows immigration. The thing that's odd about this whole thing is he offers such a bleak view of the state of America, and it can't jibe with the reality of most people's lives. There are not migrants storming major cities. They're not out murdering people. They're not even out taking American jobs. And if they are, they're jobs most Americans don't want to do anyway. So it's an interesting fear tactic. And of course, you never, fueling fear in American politics is a long traditional way of going about it. But it just, the thing that strikes me about it, and given your experience in politics, when somebody loses, they tend to revamp and reassess their whole message. You've seen both parties do this time and time again when they've really lost an election. We need to rethink our whole approach. We need to make our tent bigger. Trump lost the popular vote in 2016. He lost it in 2020. In between, during these midterms, the Republicans lost some significant number of seats. And yet you see them doubling and tripling down on what has essentially been a losing message. So I have trouble believing that's going to be sustainable, for the third or fourth major election. And also there's the wear out factor. I wonder if some of what Trump does still appeals to his most ardent supporters, but whether people are just getting kind of tired of his act.
Well, it's certainly a possibility. But on the issue of immigration, I mean, from the day that he came down the escalator in 2015, that has been the heart and soul of what he's been about. Yeah. And clearly, whether it's fair or not, the American people more and more share those concerns. And it's clear that the Harris campaign is concerned about the issue. They went to Arizona to try to, highlight her new vision of immigration. But I think that was a mistake. I think that immigration is Trump's issue, and it works. It works for him. The other issue is the economy, which is really the top thing on people's minds. So
she should be talking about the economy.
She should be.
It's an important point. Something you and I have both learned, which is, in a campaign, you want to set the agenda. You would rather have a discussion about your issues.
Yes.
And so when she starts talking about immigration, she's doing exactly what Trump wants to, because she cannot be rhetorically anywhere near what he's doing in terms of appealing to people on an emotional level.
Yeah. And my concern for her on the economy is she hasn't really laid out a clear vision of what she's going to do. And I think what happens is people look at her and say it's just going to be more of the same. CNN did a poll recently, and it showed that 80% of the people wanted either major or drastic change. So, those things aren't going to help her. At the same time, I mean, I'm not saying Trump's going to win. This thing is, kind of on a needle's edge and could go any direction.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the vice presidential debate that took place this week. The general consensus, which is always risky, is that Vance was more polished, more smooth, put a better face on some of the Trump policies. A couple of major problems for him when Walz confronted him over January 6th and said, well, it was a peaceful transition. He was there on January 20th, which is fine after his coup failed. And then when he said he had never called for a nationwide ban on abortion, when you can go online right now and find plenty of evidence that he not only has, but has stuck by it. But by and large, I don't know anybody who thinks, well, I was going to vote for so-and-so, but I'm going to vote for this guy because I like their vice presidential nominee better.
Yeah. I've never thought the vice presidential candidates mean anything. I mean, Lloyd Bentsen had a good debate back in 1988, but Michael Dukakis wasn't elected. So I do think that Vance did himself some good within the Republican Party, establishing himself as more as the heir apparent to Trump when and if Trump ever goes away. I don't think the results of the debate are going to have any impact on this current race that's going on.
Yeah, I think Vance did establish himself as a factor for 2028, regardless of what happens this year. One of the things that still lingers to me, one vision from the Republican National Convention, when it was the last speech that's been given, Trump is all done, and normally the presidential nominee and the vice presidential nominee come out, hold hands up together, and wave. Well, Vance came out and was quickly hip checked to the side by the entire Trump family. And so I've always thought they're trying to set it up for one of the next Trump kids to be the next one, not Vance. And if you know anything about Trump and his family, they're not interested in anybody else. Yeah. So just an interesting observation to me about what Vance's chances are.
One other thing, and a lot of people have brought this up. When have you seen Tim Walz? You've seen him on news clips where he's out at a rally. He hasn't done any interviews. And I think what we saw in the debate is the difference between somebody who's been out there. Anybody who would ask him, probably if we asked him, he'd probably come on the show. But it's practice. It's being ready for those tough questions that are going to come. And Walz clearly had some difficulty with several questions that were in there. And I think looking back, if Trump wins this race, the strategy of keeping the vice president and Walz kind of under wraps throughout this campaign may end up backfiring.
Well, it'll be interesting. You make a good point. And when Vance first emerged on the national stage, I don't think he was ready. Yeah. He's clearly more ready now than he was. And what's funny is Walz had sort of a fast start. He did very well the first half a dozen times we saw him. My guess is, and you've been inside campaigns, I have not. there's a propensity to overload the candidate with more information than they may be able to manage. Now, the extreme example of that was Sarah Palin, but I think it happens to everybody where you get lots and lots of advice, and after a while, it's hard to figure out which one of these people you should be listening to.
Yeah, you could see right off the bat, the first question, that Walt was very, very nervous. He got better as the debate went on, and obviously, when it got to questions like abortion and January 6th, he did well. So, it's, again, the VPs are not going to decide this race. They're an interesting sideshow, but it's going to be about Trump and Harris right down to the end.
Let's move on to some local stuff. The most notable being, San Mateo, the dispute within and outside the sheriff's office in San Mateo County. San Mateo County for decades I used to describe as a hotbed of social rest. It just wasn't a place that was known for turmoil. Going on almost 2 years ago, of course, we had this huge fight over the mayor of San Mateo that gained certainly regional, if not statewide and national attention. And it was a bitter and contentious fight. And now we have this fight. So is San Mateo County entered a new era? Is it entered a new, more contentious era?
Well, I think back, and again, I worked in the county off and on for many years. There were disputes between the independently elected officials and the Board of Supervisors. Most of those were under the surface. Occasionally, it would come out into the public view. But this situation is a whole different thing. And it's intense on both sides. Both sides seem to be willing to go to the wall on this. We're going to see the investigation that a retired judge, Ladoris Cordell, has been working on probably pretty soon. We'll see if there's, violation of policies or perhaps even something illegal done. But they both have kind of backed themselves into a corner. It's hard to see how this gets resolved.
Mm-hmm. Well, what about the larger question I was trying to get to, which is this kind of stuff doesn't happen in San Mateo County. Why is it just a confluence of events, or is there something different going on in terms of people are more combative, more contentious? I think there is more willingness to fight over things than there is to compromise, which is what the county was known for, was reaching consensus. I think there's more of a desire to stand out in the crowd. I think district elections has actually fueled that, because you're more of a sole proprietorship, even though you still need to get, a majority of votes. But in terms of gaining attention, you sort of have if you're willing to push yourself forward, you kind of have that to yourself.
Yeah, I think, in the past, at least when I was starting out, environmental issues versus people who wanted to build more throughout the county was really the dominant issue in the county. What we've seen is those issues have taken a back seat. The tremendous change, the tremendous diversity that exists in the county now, which led, I think, to the desire for district elections. A lot of these things, certainly in San Mateo, certainly with the sheriff, are more personality driven than they are a dispute over this issue or that issue.
Yeah. Joe Simidian can actually go quite at length about performative politics versus policy politics. Yeah. And he, of course, was one of the legendary policy wonks of all time. And I don't mean to make it sound like he's dead. He's just, his term is expiring, not him. Is there any way the sheriff, has a certain significant amount of autonomy. And so the question is, what are the chances this dispute is going to play out in anything other than, well, that was an interesting episode, but the sheriff gets to run, when the sheriff says, the coach picks the team, period, there's a lot of validity to that. I mean, there have to be issues of conflict of interest or inappropriate behavior, but even then, it has to be illegal, inappropriate behavior. And in short of accusing the sheriff of retaliating against someone for cooperating with the investigation. I don't see anything that approaches that. The fact is, you can appoint anybody you want, including somebody you're romantically involved with, if it doesn't constitute a conflict of interest. And people's understanding of what constitutes a conflict of interest is much broader than it really is.
Yep. It's no secret that law enforcement is a male-dominated environment. Clearly, this sheriff came in wanting to make changes. We've had a long history in the county of battles between the sheriff and the Deputy Sheriff's Association that have gone on. But it gets back to what's the end game. In the end, the sheriff, in order to be successful, has to be able to work with the county manager, the county council, and the board of supervisors. And in this situation, there's such a divide that it's hard to see how you repair that.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit. I went to an event up in South San Francisco where they named a Caltrain Plaza after Karyl Matsumoto. And then the same day, went to an event in Mountain View where a train bearing the name of Eshoo was christened. So we have those two long-standing political players getting the kind of attention and recognition you get when you're leaving the scene. We have the Board of Supervisors, two long-standing 12-year veterans are leaving. Jackie Spear is replacing one of them, Dave Pine, but you'll have at least 3 board members who are in their first term. Are we seeing the coming end of an era? I mean, it looks like it's not going to end all at once, but it is. There's, I think, a significant shift going on, don't you?
I do. And in a way, it's the end of our era. You and me.
No. We're young and vibrant.
That's right. We'll continue on. But it is the end of an era. It's the end of that, I think, cordial policies that went on here in San Mateo County for so many years. Talking about Karyl Matsumoto, she's one of those people that she served on the Samtrans board. She was on the South San Francisco City Council. But more than that, you go out in the community, you go to events, you go to things over the years, and she was there. She's one of those people, and there are a number of them that exist in the county that really have given a big part of her life to try to make things better. And she sustained that over a long period of time. And so I think she richly deserves the recognition that she got.
Yeah, she's actually not on the council anymore, but
she's not.
Certainly behind the scenes trying to pick a couple of hand-picked people to be on the South City Council.
Okay.
But you make an important point, which is that she demonstrates the ability to have influence beyond whatever office you might hold. That she is, she's a force of nature. You deal with her, and she, I served at Samtrans when she was on the board, and there was no better prepared board member. She read the packet, and I would often have long and sometimes challenging conversations with her before the board meeting because she wanted to understand the issue before she tried to address it in public. So she really did dedicate herself. What is the legacy of people like Matsumoto and Eshoo?
Well, I think, with Eshoo, you've known her forever. I've known her for 45 years. She is, first of all, when you serve in Congress for 32 years in one of the most highly visible districts in the nation, and through the period of the evolution of the tech industry and all that went on, that is a major accomplishment. People will say, oh, it's a safe district for a Democrat. But there are a lot of people in safe districts across the country who've been challenged within their own party. I think from the beginning, she understood the district that she represented. One of the things that I look back on early in her career was a vote on the North America Free Trade Agreement. it was a very difficult vote for her because you had organized labor and the people that supported NAFTA largely were Republicans. And as you know, Anna has always been a very partisan Democrat. But I think that she was able to look at the district. She was able to see the potential of what might be coming down the road. And her vote really ended up, when she voted for NAFTA, being a statement that, you know, it's important for our area here. And certainly the tech industry has dominated our area for years. They've done a lot of very good things, and they've done a lot of things that people grumble about, mostly with traffic and other things. So I think, you know, Anna is somebody that sometimes people from the outside underestimate. She's a warm, passionate person. She engages people, but I think she's proven to be a very, very savvy politician.
You know, back when she got elected, up until then, it had been a Republican seat, largely because the tech industry was very interested in their kind of Republican, which was a moderate, tough on fiscal issues, good on liberal on social issues. And most of those people are Democrats now, but have always thought that's not a permanent state for them, that they could easily back the right Republican again, and they have the wherewithal to do it. So she was very thoughtful. She, you know, warm, passionate. Yes, you know, she and I have been good friends for a long time. Politically, very astute, very smart. Much like Nancy Pelosi, easy to underestimate.
Right.
I thought of all the different ways you can refer to a member of Congress, and I think the part of it that she took most seriously was representative. That it was she. You know, I still remember when she ran against Tom Campbell before she was elected to Congress. That she ran a second time because he was running for the Senate. He put out a hit piece. The back page listed all of his academic credentials, which were like, you know, monster that devoured Cleveland.
Yes.
And next to her name, it said Associate of Arts degree, Kenyatta College.
Right.
And I knew she was always aware that it would be easy for the tech people to underestimate her, given how important credentialed education is to them. But she figured out how to talk to them, which is her great strength. She will talk to anybody, and that's why she's gotten over 60 bills signed by various presidents, not by just by Democrats, because she was willing to work across the aisle. I think we're going to wrap this up. I want to make note. Hopefully, followers of our show noticed that we did an interview with supervisor candidate Lisa Gaucher last week. We did invite her opponent, Antonio Lopez, to come on our show, and he has declined, indicating in a text message that he would prefer to use his time in voter outreach. And who's to argue with that? Please follow us on YouTube. We sound like I'm begging. Please follow us on YouTube at The Game with Mark Simon and Bob Marks. And we have the Game Facebook page. And so we'd love it if you'd come by and click on. We'd love it if you'd offer up a comment. We'll probably read some of those on here if you offer them up. Other than that, I'm Mark Simon.
I'm Bob Marks.
And thank you for being with us on another edition of The Game. And thanks to Frank Bravo for his excellent production work.